Sophia crouched behind the jagged ridge, her Barrett Mrad resting steady against her shoulder, the desert sun glinting off the scope and casting long shadows across the sand. She scanned the horizon, calculating every variable distance wind speed, elevation, and the faintest flicker of movement, a silhouette 3,000 meters away, the target moving with deliberate intent. Her finger hovered lightly over the trigger pulse. Steady mind focused each heartbeat, measured anticipation. The desert, holding its breath, waiting for the first impossible action. The soldiers around her whispered and laughed, mocking her presence, their eyes underestimating the sniper queen, as if skill alone could not surpass their assumptions. They had seen marksmen before, yet none like her, trained in patience, precision, and calculation. Sophia ignored them, her gaze locked on the distant figure, the wind carrying faint dust and heat waves that shimmered across the rocks, every grain of sand a part of her calculation. Her exhale, slow, controlled, sinking breath with heartbeat, waiting for the perfect moment to act. The general walked past unconcerned, unaware that the rifle resting in her hands represented years of impossible mastery. He did not glance at her or the badge pinned to her chest, the 300 meter insignia, a subtle signal of lethal ability. Yet Sophia did not flinch, her eyes, narrowed, tracking the target, the desert alive with motion and subtle clues she alone could detect. Her finger tightened slightly, anticipating wind shifts, subtle terrain variations, and the unpredictable variables that only instinct could account for. A sudden shimmer of metal reflected off the scope of the distant target. Sophia adjusted her aim, fractionally accounting for elevation trajectory and wind currents. The desert seemed to pulse around her, every ripple of heat and movement, signaling potential danger and opportunity. Her pulse remained steady, controlled every breath, measured her training converging into a single precise moment that could change everything. The soldiers continued their mocking, unaware that what they thought impossible was already in motion. The distant figure shifted, taking aim at another point as if aware of her presence. Sophia anticipated the movement before. It fully unfolded, her finger tightening over the trigger in perfect harmony with her calculated rhythm. The desert stretched endlessly, the horizon, a blur of heat and shadow, every microsecond vital, every movement critical. Her exhale slow, controlled, syncing mind, body, and weapon, as one ready to fire at the exact instant the desert revealed its secrets and danger, waited silently for the strike. She adjusted her stance slightly, lowering her body behind the ridge, keeping the rifle aligned with the target. Every calculation instant and precise. The soldiers whispered again, mocking, underestimating her, yet unaware their movements betrayed nothing of what they were about to witness. Sophia exhaled slowly, counting heartbeats, aligning each. With potential bullet drop, wind drift, and Coriolis effect, every factor accounted for. The desert held tension as if it too waited, knowing something extraordinary was about to occur. Then she fired the shot, the recoil traveling up her arms, the bullet tearing through the air 3,000 meters away before sound could follow. The target shifted slightly, a puff of dust erupting at the point of impact, the impossible made real. Sophia lowered the rifle, slowly scanning the horizon, her pulse steady, the soldiers frozen in disbelief, their laughter silenced by the reality of her skill. The general finally turned, eyes wide, mouth open, realizing fully that the sniper queen had done what none believed possible. Her eyes continued to track potential. Threats, the desert alive with movement, shadows, shifting, sand scattering. Her mind cataloged every variable, every unseen movement, ready to act again, if necessary. The soldiers remained silent, unable to comprehend the lethal precision she wielded. Effortlessly, her exhale slow and controlled, the desert holding its breath. The next moment uncertain and fraught with anticipation. Sophia knew instinctively that the horizon held more challenges and unseen threats waiting to test her skill and patience. A faint movement far along the ridge caught her eye, a subtle glint of metal indicating another observer or enemy approaching. She shifted slightly, adjusting the scope to account for new variables. The desert alive with tension, every heartbeat. A countdown to the next action. Her finger tightened over the trigger pulse, steady anticipation and instinct converging into readiness. The general remained a step behind, frozen in awe, unable to voice his realization. The desert holding secrets that only the Sniper Queen could uncover. Sophia shifted slightly, lowering her body behind the ridge, keeping the Barrett MRAD steady, every muscle coiled, ready to react. Her eyes scanned the horizon, the faint glint of metal moving faster than casual. Travel could explain. The desert shimmered around her, heat waves, bending light shadows blending with terrain, every detail cataloged instantly by her trained eyes. Her finger hovered lightly over the trigger pulse, steady heart synchronized with breath-counting microseconds, aligning instinct with calculation, ready for the instant she would strike. The general remained frozen, a few steps behind, disbelief etched across his features. He had seen marksmen in every theater of operations, yet none operated with the fluid anticipation she displayed. Sophia ignored him, her attention fully on the approaching figure. Each movement deliberate, calculated to test her skill. She adjusted scope and aim a fraction, accounting for wind distance, elevation and terrain, subtle variations invisible to the untrained eye. Her exhale, slow, controlled the desert alive with tension, every grain of sand, every ripple of heat contributing to awareness and readiness. The distant figure crouched briefly. Signaling or preparing an attack, Sophia anticipated trajectory, speed, and angle, instantaneously adjusting her stance behind cover. Her mind ran through every possible outcome, each calculation accounted for in fractions of a second. The desert seemed to ripple with energy, the wind carrying whispers of movement, sand brushing against rocks, signaling opportunity or danger. Her pulse remained steady, each heartbeat, a metronome syncing calculation and instinct into a lethal rhythm. Suddenly, a shot cracked across the ridge, narrowly missing her position, sand exploding at her gloves and arms. Sophia twisted instantly behind cover, firing a precise, calculated shot, the impact staggering the figure but not eliminating the threat. The second and third figures began moving to flank her, using terrain shadows and heat shimmer to their advantage. Sophia adjusted immediately, keeping all in line of sight, her finger tightening over the trigger, ready to act. The desert vibrating with tension, every motion, critical every moment, a test of skill. The fifth figure appeared along the far ridge, a subtle glint of metal in hand indicating calculated aggression. Sophia's eyes narrowed, tracking all five simultaneously. Her mind cataloged wind distance, angled trajectory and timing, every microsecond accounted for. The general stepped slightly forward, awe and disbelief warring across his face, realizing she anticipated every move before it occurred. Sophia exhaled slowly, counting heartbeats aligning, instinct with precise calculation, ready to fire the next decisive shot. The first figure lunged using shadows as cover. Sophia fired instantly, a precise, calculated round, the impact staggering the target into cover. Her body moved in perfect harmony, with terrain adjusting aim and position, every microsecond accounted for. The second and third figures shifted cautiously, attempting a coordinated attack, the desert alive with tension, sand and dust scattering in the wind. Her pulse steady, her finger light on the trigger, every movement deliberate, every heartbeat, measured anticipation and instinct merging flawlessly. Suddenly, the fifth figure advanced, more aggressively attempting to close distance. Sophia anticipated trajectory, wind elevation, and timing, instantly firing the rifle, a single shot, precise and lethal. The impact struck true, staggering the figure into cover, the desert erupting with dust, sand, and heat ripples. Her exhale, slow, controlled pulse, steady counting microseconds sinking. Movement with calculation. Every variable considered. The general remained frozen, realizing fully she had already accounted for every action. Before it occurred, her presence dominating the desert landscape. The first three figures now staggered, pinned into cover, while the fifth, cautious yet wary, attempted another approach. Sophia adjusted instantly, firing another calculated shot, the desert alive with tension, shadows shifting and heat waves shimmering, her body coiled, ready to move every heartbeat, measured every microsecond, anticipated. Her eyes scanned every ridge, every shadow, every glint of metal, ready for the next instant, the desert holding its breath as if waiting for the impossible to unfold once again. The sound rolled across the desert like thunder metal, grinding against air engines, howling as the massive vehicle crested the ridge. It was unlike anything they had seen before, a prototype armored unit painted black against the golden sand, its turret rotating slowly, scanning for heat signatures. The colonel stared through his scope, disbelief written across his face. "How did they get that here?" he muttered. She didn't answer, her eyes narrowing as she studied its movement speed and angle. She could tell by the vibration in the ground that its armor was thicker than anything standard, that this was no ordinary machine. She crouched low, adjusting the module. The blue pulse flickering weakly, she was pushing it past its limits too much. Interference, too much heat. The uplink lagging by precious seconds that could mean the difference between survival and death. The SEALs were spread across the ridge, pinned down by suppressive fire, each one counting the seconds until extraction. But she was thinking of something else. She was thinking of range, velocity, and precision. She had one chance to make it count, and the module was her only tool. The colonel shouted over the noise. "We are out of time." She looked up through the haze and caught his gaze, a silent exchange of trust and command. He gave a single nod and she turned back to the module, her fingers flying across the controls, her mind racing through numbers, wind direction, temperature drag, coefficients, everything compressed. Into instinct, she could feel the seconds bleeding away like water through her hands, the enemy unit moving closer, turret locking onto their position, the whine of its charging weapon cutting through the air. The youngest SEAL called out movement. On the left flank, she turned, seeing smaller drones sweeping in low, their rotors slicing through the heat shimmer. She adjusted the module, sending a pulse that scrambled half their sensors, causing them to collide mid-air sparks and twisted metal. Raining down, the colonel barked good hit, but it was only a temporary reprieve. The main unit was still advancing its cannon, pivoting slowly toward them, the sand vibrating beneath their boots as if the desert itself knew what was coming. She reached into her pack, pulling out a secondary transceiver. One she had kept secret until now. It was older, smaller, its casing worn from years of use. She connected it to the module, overriding standard safety protocols, rerouting the power flow. She could feel the hum of energy beneath her hands like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Unstable, dangerous, but necessary. She whispered under her breath, "Just a little longer. Just hold the line." And the colonel, who was reloading beside her, heard but didn't ask. Questions he knew better by now. The enemy unit fired a shell that tore through the ridge, sending debris and fire into the air. The SEALs dropped for cover, one shouting that they couldn't hold much longer. She looked up through the haze of smoke and heat, seeing the extraction helicopters still too far out, the sun catching their blades like shards of glass. She had to buy them more time. She focused on the module, fingers trembling from exhaustion, aligning the final coordinates. She was out of uplink satellites, But there was one last option: manual targeting. She keyed the system directly through the transceiver, feeding in every adjustment by instinct. Not code. The colonel saw what she was doing, and his face went pale. "You'll fry. The system and yourself," he shouted, but she didn't respond. She locked in the final sequence and pressed the activation trigger. The module whined a rising pitch that vibrated through the air, the blue pulse flaring to white for an instant, and then fading. She looked toward the horizon, the satellite feed cutting through the interference just long enough for the strike to lock on. She exhaled slow, steady, waiting for the signal. The impact came like the sky collapsing, the explosion ripping. Across the dunes, a shockwave throwing sand into the air like a tidal wave. The massive armored unit vanished beneath a cloud of fire and dust. The SEALs hit the ground, the sound deafening their radios filled with static and broken shouts when the dust settled. The ridge was a scarred ruin, and the machine that had hunted them was nothing but molten wreckage. She stayed on one knee chest, heaving hands, trembling over the dead module, the light flickering faintly once, twice, and then going dark. The colonel approached, checking her pulse, his eyes softening for the first time. "You just saved all of us," he said. She nodded weakly, staring at the smoke rising in the distance. She knew it wasn't over. She could feel it deep in her bones. The enemy had moved too fast, too coordinated. This wasn't a random strike. This was a test, and she had just shown them how to counter it. Her voice was quiet when she finally spoke. "They know where we are now." The colonel frowned. "What do you mean?" She pointed. Toward the horizon, where faint trails of dust were already visible, reinforcements moving fast, heavy transports from the south. She stood slowly, her legs trembling but her eyes hard. They were being hunted, and the next wave would be worse. She looked at the module one last time, its shell cracked and blackened from the overload. It had served its purpose, but it would not save them twice. The youngest SEAL patched his wound, grimacing through the pain. "What do we do now?" he asked. She looked toward the wreckage of the enemy machine and then to the approaching horizon, her voice steady. "We move east. There's an old comm station there off-grid. If we reach it, we can call for a deep extraction before they box us in." The colonel nodded, trusting her judgment completely. The team gathered their gear, moving quickly down the ridge, their boots sinking into hot sand, the sound of engines growing louder behind them. As they moved, she fell to the back of the formation, scanning the sky, the air, thick with heat and dust, her mind running through possible outcomes, escape routes, fallback points. She had seen operations like this before. Only once had she survived one, and it had cost her everything. The colonel glanced back at her, once eyes, narrowing as if he could sense what she was thinking. She met his gaze for a second, and then turned away, her hand tightening on the grip of her rifle, the faint echo of rotor blades in the distance growing louder. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled again, not from artillery, but from something deeper, an explosion underground that sent a plume of sand shooting upward. The SEALs hit the ground as shock waves rippled through the desert. She rolled to the side, grabbing the colonel by his vest, pulling him down as another blast erupted further east, her mind racing through maps of the terrain, old installations, old tests from another era. She realized too late where they were heading, and the truth froze her blood. They weren't just running toward safety. They were running into something buried, something meant to stay forgotten. The air was thicker now, filled with dust and static, every breath like swallowing grit. The sun had started to fall behind the dunes, turning the sky into a haze of copper and smoke. The team moved in silence, each one focused on the path ahead, but she could feel the tension pulling tighter with every step. The colonel kept looking over his shoulder, watching the horizon where faint black specks were starting to appear, aircraft too distant to identify, but closing fast. They didn't have long before the sky itself turned hostile. She pushed forward, following the faint trail on her map, the coordinates etched into her memory from An old briefing she was never meant to see. The comm station wasn't on any modern grid, its existence buried beneath layers of classified operations. It was built decades ago during an era when wars were waged in silence, when satellites didn't. Blink and men vanished without records. If it still stood, it would be their only chance of survival. The colonel trusted her lead, but he could tell from the look in her eyes that she was remembering something she hadn't shared. They reached the edge of a dry ravine, the sand thinning to reveal jagged rock. She signaled for the team to halt, kneeling to inspect faint tracks at the base. They weren't animal prints, they were boot impressions, deep and recent. She turned to the colonel, whispering that someone had been here within the last 24 hours. His expression hardened, and he motioned for the SEALs to spread out. They moved with precision, silent as Shadow's weapons raised, scanning every ridge, every rock formation, but the desert was empty, too quiet. She descended first, her boots crunching softly against loose gravel, the sound echoing faintly against the canyon walls at the bottom. The air felt cooler, the shade cutting the heat, but it also carried a strange scent, like burned metal. She crouched near a half-buried object, brushing away sand. It was a drone chassis, old model, partially melted as if hit by a directed energy blast. She studied the markings, faint but recognizable. It bore the insignia of a defunct program one she thought had been decommissioned years ago. Her stomach tightened as realization crept in. The colonel joined, her eyes narrowing as he recognized the same insignia. This wasn't an accident. This place wasn't forgotten at all. He whispered. She nodded. Tracing the lines with her glove, someone had reactivated it, and that meant the enemy they were facing wasn't just a rogue force. They were using old American tech. She turned toward the eastern wall, where faint structures jutted from the rock. Metal doors rusted but intact, the entrance to the comm station. She pointed, and the SEALs advanced, weapons ready, every step deliberate, every sound magnified by the echoing canyon. The first SEAL reached the door and tried the panel. Dead power. Lines stripped clean. She moved forward, pulling a small device from her pouch, a compact energy spike generator. She attached it to the access port. The indicator flickered once, twice, then glowed faint blue. The mechanism clicked, and the "you said"